Welcome to the 62nd episode of the GameFor Podcast. It's not 60 seconds long. It's the 60 number 62. In this episode, we'll talk about whether video games will beat tabletop games. And in that sentence, "beat" is in air quotes. Nice. Well, it's in real quotes. I made air quotes, but you can't see it. I'm Adam.
I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor Podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called MilkCan, and because most of the folks at MilkCan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Yes, that's the point. Tabletop gaming.
Yes.
Have you been able to do any kind?
I'm on like the cusp. I'm on the cusp.
You're nearly there.
Yeah, our basement is officially done.
Mm-hmm.
Carpet is down. Like I no longer have anything of. It's done except.
Right.
There's no except. So stuff has been being moved out of my gaming space. I'm reclaiming it. Mm-hmm. My hobby space is nearly back. I have my pinball machine is the only last thing to move, which doesn't bother me that it's there. And so I will be hobbying again momentarily.
Nice. So you haven't done any gaming or like working on models or anything like that? Sure.
Yeah, it's been a crazy. We were in Chicago on a family trip.
That's right. You were gone all last weekend.
So
yeah.
That ate up some time. It was fun. I want to say there was some stuff I did that was kind of hobby related down there that I looked at, but I'm drawing a blank. So
okay. Well, that's something though.
But yeah, hopefully you've been doing more.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to some degree, I have been. I've had more free time, thankfully, a little bit more now, because we did finally launch the pay what you want solo/co-op expansion for Reign in Hell, which is called the Oculus Spear. It launched a week and 2 days ago, I believe, as of this recording, and it's doing nice, and people are enjoying it. We're getting good feedback from folks who are talking about the solo and co-op kind of thing behind everything. The idea basically is that it's a 6-part or a 6-scenario story, so you're actually playing the scenarios in order to kind of, it's like a little mini campaign that you play either with yourself or potentially with a friend, and it's been cool. It's been nice to not have to be working on layout and be working on like a lot of that kind of stuff. It's been helpful to do that, and so that's been cool. So
it's always fun when that project finally wraps up.
Yeah, it is. And so just kind of seeing it out there in the wild. I mean, we've still got stuff to work on a little bit here and there. I want to do a press release and some other stuff. But otherwise, yeah, it's out there in the wild, and that's making us happy. So that's cool. And then, what have I been doing with my hobby? Well, I bought these weird models, I don't know, a couple months back off of Etsy, and they're 3D printed, and I forget who the sculptor is, unfortunately. I'm a bad person. But they are kind of cyberpunk, sort of like Black Ops. Hard to tell if they're supposed to be police or something. It's hard to tell, but they're cool, kind of cyberpunk sort of guys. There's 3 of them, and they've got helmets and these weird suits, and they got crazy guns that are kind of bullpup type, like some sort of, I guess, submachine guns or something like that.
Okay.
And then I also got 2 robots with them that are, frankly, they remind me a little bit of like Chappie, a little bit, if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah.
Guy who did District 9. So I've painted, they're predominantly mostly painted. The 3 humans are pretty much done. I think I need to throw one more layer of black on the rims around them, and then maybe throw just I'm going to varnish them then, and then I'm maybe just throw a little tiny bit of like that kind of grass stuff, not like flock, but the little tufts, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I might throw a tuft on 1 or 2 of their bases just to be like stuff coming through the rubble or whatever, but I've given them very rubble bases. And they're very gray and dark monochrome. They've got like a red lens on their helmet, but otherwise everything else is kind of dark, almost black and white. But that makes kind of sense in their in their system because they're like Black Ops, and they're pretty cool. So those guys I worked on. Frankly, I've been playing some video games a little bit lately. I know, kind of about what we're talking about today. There's this game that came out, one of those MMO type games called New World, and I had been playing it in the closed beta a little bit, and then it launched. It's interesting. It launched literally the day after we launched the expansion. So like I got done with the expansion and then could start playing the video game because it didn't like launch, the video game didn't launch early. So that therefore I was like, oh man, I can't play the video games. I gotta get this finished. It was like a lovely little prize after I got done, laying everything out. But because everybody else is also trying to play it at the same time, it's a situation where I'm, at least early on, you go, oh, I'm going to play the game. It's going to be a lot of fun. I got some time here. And then it would be like, hey, you're 1700th in line. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go hobby while I wait until I can eventually get, into the whole thing. And so, yeah, it has actually increased my hobby time because I'm like, click on the thing and it's like, yep, you're going to be waiting for a while. And then I'm like, all right, cool. And then I go do that. And that's when I kind of got done with this stuff. But otherwise, I've been working on, beyond that, on Twitch. I'm nearly finished with the 5 members of the Chaos War Band that I'm doing for Warcry. Those guys are mostly done, and I just need to kind of tweak them and a little bit more stuff. And then there's 2 more heroes that are in that group. That's a total of 7 models. And one's on foot, and one is on some sort of big, weird lizard dog thing, and those will be probably what I'll be working on next on Twitch. But
so how many warbands will that bring you up to
for Warcry?
Yeah,
it might be my 5th. Well, hang on, let me see. There's Ghosts, there's Nurgle, there's Skaven, there's Stormcast. It's my 5th or my 6th, and it's only my 6th if there's one that I'm forgetting, which I might be, but I'm pretty sure it's 5th. So yeah,
nice.
And then, frankly, I want to get started working on another one soon too. I've been thinking about doing actually another Skaven one with different, because my other Skaven one was just all Plague Monks, 13 Plague Monks, and this next one I would like to have some clan rats and a storm fiend and just some other random stuff in there. I know I went online because some of the Skaven stuff is old enough that you have to like buy it direct from Games Workshop. It's like it can't get shipped to stores or something like that. And so I know I did order some stuff that were like rat ogres and some other guys. So yeah, I want to go through and make a list for that and then figure out what to paint and kind of go from there. It's a lot of fun to paint Skaven because they're mostly fur. Well, not always, but there's a decent amount of fur, so it's fun to do. And that big storm fiend I really want to paint because it's basically like a giant, almost like robot body with like a rat in it for the most part, kind of. He's just got like a little rat head, but then, the rest of him is just this massive kind of like steampunky fantasy robot. So I think that'd be a lot of fun to paint as well. So,
yeah.
But yeah. What about the app? What about the app updates?
App updates.
Dun, dun, dun.
We need like a little jingle or something. Like.
Sure. Sure.
Why not?
Right?
Yeah. So we are up to 1.0.3. I believe the last update was 1.0.2, but
on the Game Library Manager.
Yeah. And in fact, I know one of our users and listeners used it for a game convention. Mm-hmm. Sounded like it went fairly well, nice. But he did find some, at scale things feedback. So. We are adding that to our outstanding list, and we'll be getting some of those adjustments in. So stuff like having multiple versions of the same game. So like Uno 1, Uno 2, yeah.
Sure, I could see that.
And then there were some weird conflict UPCs where they reused, but they were for the same, for like expansions and stuff. So,
okay, sure, yeah.
So, yeah, nothing crazy, so it sounded like it overall went really well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, some stuff that we're going to try to get in and keep improving it so it's useful for everybody.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the GameFor, we've launched a new app underneath the GameFor umbrella. It is not the standard GameFor app. The work on that is still in progress. But it's called the GameFor Game Library Manager, and it's for you to manage your game library. Kind of pretty much what it says on the tin there.
Yeah.
The idea is that it is designed predominantly for, let's say you've got a game library at a small convention, like a local convention or whatever, and rather than having to check in and check out of an Excel document, who has what and this and that and the other thing, it's a very simple thing to be able to scan the UPC, get the game, either scan their badge or put some sort of information in there about the person, and now you know who has what, how long they've had it, all that kind of stuff when they bring it back. But it can also be used if you're one of those folks who's, let's say, got a whole bunch of board games, and I know a lot of board gamers have a lot of board games, and if you want to just basically like loan them out a lot, but then not forget who has what, this is also a nice little thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah. But yeah, so we're in progress on that. We're in progress on the main GameFor platform, the app, plus also web. Yeah, things are moving along, and we'll tell you more about things as we come across them.
Yeah, in GameFor proper, we actually have some active development on that work too. So
yeah,
one of our devs actually started writing some of the new code, which was a big step.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're getting closer and closer to that. So stay tuned for updates.
Indeed. So today's subject, we're talking about whether or not video games will beat tabletop games. I came up with this concept. I was outside in the driveway with my cat, Diesel. He was walking around sniffing things, as he likes to do. I think once winter comes, he's going to be kind of sad. But we've been walking around with him outside and stuff like that, keeping him within arm's, well, maybe in arm's reach, but keeping an eye on him. We don't just let him outside because he will get run over by a car because he is not smart. But I was just thinking about, video games and tabletop games because I've been, again, like I said, playing some video games again lately, which I don't usually do, but I started thinking about it, and then I was like, I got to remember that. That sounds like a good subject, and then, put it into the thing that we keep all those different episode ideas, put it into that file so I wouldn't forget about it because my memory is garbage. Side note, if you've got a topic idea, definitely let us know. Podcast at iamgamefor.com. I'll mention that again at the end of the show, but definitely, or throw it in the YouTube comments if you got an idea. That's fine. Absolutely. But anyway, so the thought kind of came through my head, are video games going to beat tabletop games?
Right.
And I guess that depends on what your definition of beat is, right?
Right.
Exactly. So
yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? Is that it is a situation of, I don't know, like, if you're talking about money, they already have, right? Mm-hmm. Like, by a lot.
Right.
Yeah. If we're talking about, money raised, I mean, we talked in last episode about how in 2019, the tabletop gaming market had something like $1.7 billion in revenue, according to the ICV2 website, icv2.com. Whereas video games made about $120 billion in comparison. So if we're going to just go down, apples to apples and say money to money, well, yeah,
It's 100 times, yeah.
Exactly, and that's totally understandable. I get it.
That's further than a rounding error.
Right, yeah, that's not a rounding error. That's not somebody who forgot to carry the 5. That is definitely kind of a huge thing. And it, again, like we said in last episode, it's not a game of who's making the most money in this game of the games. There's a lot of games going on. It's games inside games. But yeah, it's not a race to see which industry makes more money. But, so the overall concept of, are they going to beat, I guess in my mind, the belief is, and you've heard this probably before if you've been paying attention to the tabletop gaming industry over the last 20 to 30 years, the cry that goes out is that video games are going to destroy tabletop games.
Right.
So as far as beat is concerned, not so much are they going to make more money? Yeah, totally. They already are. And there's nothing wrong with
destroy,
that, frankly. Right. But yeah, like literally like stamp out. Are they going to stamp out tabletop gaming? And I would say no. And there's a lot of reasons why. For one thing, tabletop games aren't dying, not by any stretch of the imagination.
No, they're kind of going the opposite direction.
Right. The industry has been growing year on year for, I think it's at least a decade, if not longer.
It seems like it's Yeah, it's 15 years, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, like there were times, like even when I was going to Gen Con, where like, yeah, tabletop gaming was like, but then, well, like just Gen Con alone, let's just mention that. In 2010, the Gen Con had, I believe the stat is in Gen Con in 2010 had 30,000 attendees.
Which is still pretty good.
Right. This year, post-pandemic, first one back, they say they had 35.
Wow, and they were like super limiting it.
Right,
like,
exactly. This year was 35, and it was half. So 2019 was over 70,000, so something like 72. But my point is that between 2010, where they had 30,000, and 2015, which by my math is 5 years later.
Yep.
Checks out.
Carried the 6.
Right. Yep. They had 60,000. So they doubled their attendance in 5 years. This is a convention that's been going on for, at that point, 35 or 40 years.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Because it was 50 years in 2018 or 19.
Oh, wow.
Was the 50th Gen Con.
Yeah, they put Roman numerals and it confuses me sometimes.
Yeah, no, those are I can't watch the Super Bowl anymore. But yeah, so it's one of those situations where like it's been growing and it's been growing, and then just literally, if we're going to talk about some like real breaking news kind of stuff here.
Yeah.
So Twitch is a platform in which generally you watch video game people play video games.
Right. It was primarily set up for it. I mean, if you go on and use Twitch, like the awards and loot that you can get are almost always like in-game game stuff, very favorable to streaming your games. But tabletop people have been starting to use it for a variety of things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to brag, but I've been using it for over a year now. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of people out there, like in the area where I am, sitting there painting miniatures and things like that. There's people like Board Game Geek. They stream pretty regularly on Twitch, and there's a lot of people who are live streaming. It's still gaming content. It's just not video gaming content.
Right. So so this morning they had probably one of the most severe security issues that I've seen in recent times.
Very, very, very
because
bad.
Not only did they have like the data leak of users, like what really seemed like happens all the time now.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. They always make you like do all of this stuff with your password. Oh, it's got to have a lowercase letter, an uppercase letter, and a number, and a special character, and we need to know a color, and all this stuff. And I'm like, but you're just going to lose my password anyway and get breached, so I don't know why I'm going through all of this. You know what I mean? Like, it's silly, but...
It's normally, because when we get breached, it will be harder for them to get into your account still, maybe.
It'll take more time to type. It takes me more time to type. Right. I get that, yeah. Like, I screwed up more than the hackers were.
But yeah, so they, as part of this, it's literally just coming out kind of overnight this morning, because all of their data seems to be there.
Like source code, like database, like everything. Not just like, oh, look, we got your password, but like everything.
Right. They can like a
financial information.
I can see Frank March 3rd checked in this code check. But already people are putting together a list of like, hey, here's exactly how much money Twitch has paid out to everybody.
Exactly.
And so everybody's like, okay, well now we can finally know it's not hidden.
How much are these people making?
Who the top earner on Twitch is, and and everybody's like, oh, it's Uncle Adam.
No, that's not true at all. No, it's
but it did still surprise me.
Critical role.
Yeah.
They basically, someone took data from August of 2019 which is pre-pandemic, to October of 2021, which is now, and then they just took all these different creators and said, okay, who got the most payouts in that amount of time? And it was Critical Role, number one, with $9.62 million American. And now this is bits, subs, gifted subs, stuff like ad revenue. This has nothing to do with any kind of sponsorships they might do, or any kind of donations, right? Because donations are separate, all that kind of stuff. So this is just Twitch revenue. How much Twitch is paying out to Critical Role? $9.62 million in dollars, and that's beating every other streamer out there on the platform, including massive video game streamers like XQC, Summit1G, Tim the Tatman, Ninja, like all these people you've heard of.
Well, yeah, I'm feeling so old right now because I'm like, I've heard of almost none of them. I had to go down to like almost 50 to like find one that I knew, like Ninja.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, he was way down there. But
he left the platform for a good amount of time. He went over to Mixer for a while. Now, don't get me wrong, he came out just fine because he got paid by Microsoft. It's a whole thing.
He's
but
not poor.
As far as actual Twitch revenue, that's the reason I think that he's so well known, but so far down the list. But all that being said, Critical Role was number one, and it was literally. Yeah, I mean, now let's be perfectly frank. I'm pretty sure it was also the only in the top 50 that was a tabletop gaming thing.
Yeah, I didn't recognize anyone else.
No. And there was a ton of them in there that were making huge amounts of money. I'm like, I have no idea who that is. And I'm a person who kind of pays attention to Twitch a decent amount.
Number 62 was, if I remember right, is like one of the Formula One drivers. So, I mean, there's celebrities up there. That
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those people were doing that stuff during the pandemic. But all that being said, the fact that the big video game streaming platform was, as far as revenue is concerned, which if we're talking about revenue again versus, that dominated that platform was a bunch of people playing D&D, and whatnot. That's, I think, very interesting. I was frankly kind of surprised by that. And it's, so it's one of those situations where I think that, the question becomes, why are tabletop games not dying off when huge video games are making so much money and dominating the market? I saw an article just recently that the most single, as far as revenue is concerned, the piece of entertainment that has made more money than any other piece of entertainment ever.
Okay, all time, yeah.
All time. Beating out Star Wars Episode 4.
Okay.
Beating out, what's that old-timey movie about the burning of the Atlanta? Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind, okay.
Right.
Yep.
So beating out Gone with the Wind, beating out Star Wars, Episode 4. Grand Theft Auto 5 made more money than any other, beats all the Marvel films, like all of it. And so, yet, there are still people pushing around meeples, and there's people still sitting around tables and talking to each other about stuff that in the Monster Manual and things like that. And so then that's the question, why are these things not only hanging on, but also growing? Now, again, I personally do not ever believe that all of a sudden someday they're going to be bigger than video games, not by any shot.
Right.
No. Partially, it's kind of because of the first kind of thing we're going to mention here, and that is that generally, for the most part, tabletop games considerably cheaper to buy.
Yeah, especially when you count in the systems. But even then, it's like, games are what now, 60? Are they almost? Are some starting to go?
Video game companies, the big ones, would really love it to make them all 70 now. So that's the thing that they're heading towards.
Which you think system cost, that's about almost a quarter to a fifth of the.
Depends on the system, yeah. Like the newer, let's say your PlayStation 5 and stuff like that, I think that costs between $400 and $500 depending which version you buy or something like that. And then you've got still then the software. But yeah, now admittedly, let's be perfectly frank here. There are certain tabletop games that can be more expensive. Certainly, says the guy who's not literally sitting on a pile of miniatures, because that would be very pointy. But you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of miniatures, and so those things can be quite expensive to get into in comparison. Whereas something like D&D can be relatively inexpensive to get into.
Right. You can pretty much start learning to play for free. Yeah. So, yes, you can go to your friend's house and play on their PlayStation for free as well.
Sure.
So, yeah, but comparatively, and then you're just, you go to your friend's house, you get the itch, you're like, okay, I'm going to invest. One is going to cost you I think the player's handbook still hasn't gone up compared to what the other ones are. So let's just say $40 US. Now I was playing with my friend's PlayStation and now want to get that game in the system. That's $600 probably.
Yeah, I mean, depending on which way you go, obviously there's always things you can do cheaper. You can buy a used machine. There's lots of options,
but still, you're not getting it for $40.
If we're going to go retail to retail, right? You're talking about a considerably difference in money there, and even if you're going to say, oh well, I already own a computer. Everybody owns a computer. You can't take the computer costs into it. You're talking about PC games. Sure, there are $20 games out there, but D&D is, just for an example again, probably one of the biggest, it's probably the biggest RPG, right? So then take that and compare that to one of the biggest video games out there, and they're still going to generally cost $50 to $60 to $70.
Plus in like 10 years when it's D&D 7.0, and now we're at Madden 48 or whatever.
Sure,
it is.
yeah.
One is still going to be able to. I'm going to be able to use my dice and my table that I'm using now, and the other one is not going to run on my PC.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, you've got companies out there like Good Old Games that take old games and figure out a way to basically make them work on PCs, even though they are like old newer PCs and stuff like that. But that's kind of not the standard. And if we're talking about consoles, then you basically have to hold on to the old console and all that kind of stuff.
And hope it doesn't break.
Or Red Ring, or whatever. And if it's a multiplayer platform, then very probably the servers have been shut down. You know what I mean? Like that happens too. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. In tabletop gaming, you obviously have like Games Workshop these days is like, hey, we're putting in a new version of every game every 3 years. So you got to buy new books, and I get that. But there's also people out there I know that are playing old games. And you can do that a bit easier in the tabletop realm than you can in video games. Neither of them is impossible, certainly, but that's kind of the way that seems to work. The other thing that's interesting, and I guess I hadn't thought about this, but we were kind of talking about it, and like tabletop games are very much cheaper and easier to produce.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
Like let's say you want to make some goofy little mobile app. Okay.
I'm ready to make my goofy mobile app.
Right.
Yep.
You have to, if you've got the idea for it, you have to learn how to program to be able to even produce it. You have to be able to figure out to some degree how to kind of go through all that stuff to program. And if you want it to be available on multiple platforms, you have to figure it out twice, kind of. And there's just a lot of different little things. Whereas if you wanted to self-publish like a little tiny 16-page miniatures game, just a rule set, and then put it out there as a PDF, you could literally, if you have a computer, you could do it. And just any, like even Word or Google Docs, you could easily crank something out in Google
Docs. Yeah, because your artwork,
Docs.
you could take pictures and
sure,
stuff like
there's
that.
a lot of little things that you could do that people, like with free software that's already available. Like I said, you could produce a game in Google Docs and put it out there for people.
Yeah.
Whereas with video gaming, even on the very low-end indie stuff, there's still a decent barrier to entry to kind of get into it. If you're just talking about an idea haver, right? I'm a person who's like, okay, I've got this idea. If you can type, you can make an RPG to some degree. It may not be pretty, and it may not, but it will get the point across. Whereas even if you wanted to have a video game with like basically no graphics, it's a good deal more difficult.
Yeah, there are some things that will help you drag and drop and stuff like that. Sure. But I understand.
There's programs out there on the PC right now, things like, have you ever seen Game Maker? So Game Maker is an interesting kind of piece of software that allows you to make kind of like two-dimensional kind of, are they RPG-ish or more along those lines?
Yeah.
And there's like, I think there's libraries of sprites that you can use, but you can also make your own and, that kind of stuff. But still, in comparison, it's...
Well, and typically those are things you have to kind of build games that are like other games that are already out there.
Right, exactly.
Versus if for board games, you could be like, oh, I have this cool idea. There's nothing else like this. And it's going to use this type of rule set. You could do that, where that would be very, very, very difficult without starting everything yourself to do it.
Right. It's like you decide, okay, I have this idea in my head and I want to make it into a Hollywood movie. That's an incredible amount of luck and work and money and all of these things. You have this incredible sci-fi whatever masterpiece in your head, and you have to do all this work, and thousands of people have to work to make this actual reality so that actors can walk around in it to some degree, even though maybe it's computer graphics and all that kind of stuff, like in The Mandalorian, and all that jazz. Or you could just make a video game of it, and then you don't need actual actors and you don't need actual sets, and everything is digital.
But Apple showed me I could just use my phone.
Well,
they have a commercial that shows me
that's
I can make...
true. They do have a commercial. But then let's say you decide, well, heck, I'll just make a comic book.
Yeah.
And then you could do that, but then the last option, and probably one of the easiest ones, and one that's been around probably the longest, is like, why don't I just write a story? And that's basically kind of what an RPG is. You know what I mean? Like, specifically, RPGs are mostly about kind of sitting around and talking and things like that. So all of these things together, I think it makes a situation where game development for tabletop overall is easier. Again, if you're going to be getting into some big multi-million-dollar, miniature game with lots of like licensed, like Star Wars dudes and all this kind of stuff. Sure, that's not for your average person to whip up on a weekend or whatever.
No, it's at least 2 weekend projects.
Probably at least, but still, yeah, that's I think a big thing that's going to keep. I think that's one of the things that keeps tabletop gaming, at least. It's easier to be indie in tabletop games than it is to be in video games, and so that I think it's also one of those things that helps it so that it doesn't die off. Yeah. Because there are people that get interested in that kind of stuff, and they do it for quite a while, and then eventually either one of their things takes off. There's plenty of stories, about small companies that came up with an idea that eventually then a bigger company comes along and says, "Hey, we would like to publish that," or whatever. You see it in companies like the Game Crafter. Game Crafter's out of Madison, Wisconsin, and it's a place where you can go and you can basically, they'll do print-on-demand board games based off of all your uploaded artwork and all that stuff, and it's really cool. And there have been companies that have made things that then other companies have come along and said, we want to publish that for you, but not through Game Crafter, regular through our company and all that kind of stuff. And so they've kind of gotten, pulled up to the big leagues, as it were. So yeah, I think that that's a big thing. With tabletop games, and in my opinion, it's one of the things that got me interested in wanting to do more tabletop game design recently, as a matter of fact. What about multiplayer? Yeah. So, in my opinion, there's a part of multiplayer that works a lot easier in video gaming, where you sit down and you go, I want to play multiplayer, and you push a button and you're playing multiplayer with other people. And we've talked about that a bunch in our pitch for GameFor, about how, well, in video gaming, it's very easy to play multiplayer, isn't it? Because you just push the multiplayer button and there you go. Whereas with tabletop gaming, you actually have to know somebody else to play.
Right. You have to usually walk with your feet to those people.
Exactly. And you have to talk to them and stuff like that. Now, the thing is, though, is if you already know people who like to play tabletop games, I mean, let's say you do, or let's say you have a family and they're interested in doing it. It's actually a lot easier to play tabletop games multiplayer like that than video games. Yeah,
absolutely. If I want my whole family to play a tabletop game, it's easy. Right? Put it at the table and we all sit around and play.
Hence the tabletop part.
Yeah. It took me probably a good solid morning the one time that all three kids wanted to play on the same Minecraft server with their each individual device to get it working the first time. It wasn't the easiest thing, and I'm kind of a techie guy, so
it's true, yeah.
I feel like most of it wasn't too bad. But, yeah, it took me far longer than setting up game night.
Right. I mean, the whole concept, I think one of the things that makes board games obviously so popular is that one person opens the box and then explains the rules, and then everybody sits down and plays, and everybody else other than the person who brought the game needed to bring nothing, like themselves, that's right. About it. If you're going to sit down to play RPGs, generally the GM/DM, whatever, needs to have stuff.
Some rules, yeah.
And maybe the people who are playing need some paper and some pencils or whatever, some dice. Dice are nice. But that's about it. If me and three of my good friends want to sit in the same place and play a video game together, we're going to have a LAN party. And I've gone down that road. Back in the day, I used to run LAN parties. And the bigger the LAN party, the much more work it becomes. And when I say bigger, I mean more than 3 or 4 people. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And I used to, the biggest LAN party we ever did was 96 or 98 people, and it was a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah, that just hurts my head.
Yeah. And so that's the whole thing. Sure, there's things that you can do, nowadays. I think the Nintendo Switch, it can kind of build its own sort of little mesh network a little bit easier. So if we're all going to sit down and play, I don't know, Mario Kart, they still got Mario Kart in that, don't they? I think they do.
Yeah, they have a new Mario Kart.
And so, like, if we all own a Switch at $300
the other
a
thing
piece,
is that sometimes the games allows you to play multiplayer online, but not a multiplayer with your friends.
Also true. That's a very good point, yeah. Like, I'm used to the old ways where basically the only way to play was with your friends because you didn't have online too much.
Right.
I mean, now, obviously, I'm playing stuff that's predominantly online, and there are benefits, obviously, to being able to, like, I can play online with friends of mine who live across the country and who I can't see.
Yeah.
But it's really hard if you want to play with your family. You know what I mean? I mean, in theory, my wife and I could sit down and play. We're not particularly interested in playing the same type of video games. She's more into turn-based strategy stuff. But if we did want to, we could. It's just, she's got her computer upstairs and mine's in the basement. But most people don't have that. Most people, a lot of households have one PC, so it's real hard to play games like that. Most households have got like one PlayStation or one Xbox or whatever, and so yeah, it though it's easy to just jump into multiplayer games with randos. It's much more difficult in video gaming to jump into video games with people that you know or live with or whatever and that kind of stuff. And so because of that, the tabletop thing I think is still definitely got its benefits there as well. Well,
and then the other thing, like generations. Like, if I want to play a video game, my grandmother's probably not the right generation to do that.
Very good point.
Whereas, I pull out, again, if I pulled out, there's board games that definitely wouldn't work with that, but there's board games that she grew up playing.
Grandma's not interested in Twilight Struggle or anything like that?
Right.
Or, yeah.
But,
Twilight Imperium? Twilight Imperium.
I knew it. Well, there is a...
There's Twilight Struggle, too?
That's the diplomacy.
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm not interested in those either, and I'm not grandma. So, yeah.
Right. But, there's, Monopoly or Life or checkers, chess. I mean, you can play with people.
Gin.
Rummy. Yep. Oh, yeah, card games, tons of them.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So,
but yeah, you're right. I mean, there is definitely the generational thing as well. And I think that's also important. Now, obviously, as people, like, I was talking to somebody just recently about how, like, when I'm in a retirement home, I think there's going to be a lot of video games at the retirement home, when you're older. Like, right now, it's people who, they get, when I went to, my dad was in a place, you'd go there and you'd see people sit around playing cards. But I think that when I'm that age, I think you're going to be seeing people sit around playing some video games. They may be older video games if they can get them to work or whatever,
right.
or whatever. But that'll be interesting to kind of see. I'm hoping that that's the case. I'm hoping it's not a situation of sitting around playing gin rummy because I don't want to do that.
No, but yeah, like if you're like, oh, hey, we finally can have our LAN party and
right, yeah,
like.
Just be yelling at people in other rooms and be
like,
that sounds like a lot of fun. But I think, the generational thing is definitely a situation that if you're trying to get, like, even a person younger than me who's got kids, if their kids play, like, Fortnite, you're not playing Fortnite with your kids. Like, that's...
Very rarely, yeah.
Just because it's like it's a totally different game than maybe you even grew up on.
Right.
You're like, that Mario, that Super Mario 3, that was awesome. That was dope. And the kids are looking at today going, I can't do that weird dance.
Why is he a plumber?
Why is he a plumber? Yeah, no, that seems yeah. And so the generational thing is also a big deal because sitting down to play. Now, admittedly, there's a little bit of generational stuff here and there as far as tabletop games too, but I think it's fewer and far between.
There's at least games that will gap that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's also a sense of, at least, and this is maybe me projecting a little bit, but I feel like a lot of people believe that tabletop play, depending on the type of game it is and whatnot, does feel a bit more real because of imagination.
Ooh.
Video game graphics keep getting better and better and better and better, and it's becoming more and more photographic almost, or near photographic, and that's great. But, when I bump into other tabletop gamers that I know and they tell me about what happened during their RPG session recently that they're very excited about, it's rare that someone tells you, at least in my personal opinion, I don't come across people too frequently who are like, let me tell you about this awesome thing that happened in this video game recently. It happens once in a while. Your kids will tell you that, I saw some comedian recently who posted something on Twitter that says, "Can you die from your kids telling you about a YouTube video? Because it feels like you can die from it." And I'm like, okay, I got to be honest. I'm sure there were times when I was watching some sitcom as a little kid, and then I came in and told my parents about it, like during the commercial break, and I'm sure they thought the same thing. But I think you can get that with video games too. Like if you start to tell kids, if you're a little kid and you're telling your parents about what happened in Minecraft. But I think that at least people, as they get older, I think that I personally think that those things become, because you're using imagination and you're not just looking at graphics on a screen, I think it becomes like more real of a story. I've never really, even in like role-playing games, video game role-playing games, I've never like felt about a character that I'm playing the same as I do like in a RPG or something like that.
Yeah, well, and it's typically like most of those games, you kind of do that third-person view of them too, so it doesn't feel like you're the person. I know that.
Yeah, you're like watching. Yeah,
some, but
exactly.
Yeah, you're kind of.
Yeah, sure. There's first-person shooters, but those games are completely, almost always about faceless people that are just shooting. You know what I mean, like other dudes or whatever, or monsters and stuff like that. And in a third-person view, you're right. You're like watching kind of from behind the person in a video game. But when you're playing a character like I can still remember, like my first D&D campaign, I had this character named Arthur Ironstaff, and I still remember that name 40 years later, basically. Yeah. And I don't remember what I had for breakfast. You know what I mean? Like it's so, yeah, I think it definitely does get ingrained in you. And
it uses a different part of your brain and memory.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The imagination, when you're trying to like conjure the imagination to say this is how the game is played and this is what's going on, and the GM is explaining it and all that kind of stuff, I think those things make things very real. Board games, though, generally a little bit more, how would you call it? Like abstract to some degree. They still, I think, I don't know, they stimulate a different part of your brain that some people, I think, really dig, and I think that helps a lot. And then miniature games and things like that, I'm always thinking about little stories and like why are these figures together? And like even when I'm painting them, I'm thinking about like why is this guy got this pouch here? What's this? What's he keeping in there? His keys? What is that? Just stuff like that. And so I think that like I just literally don't think about video games that way. Even in games where I have tons of control, like this new world I was talking about before, like you can put on different types of armor and you can go. There's like a little marketplace where you can like people can sell like stuff they make, and then you can buy it, and you're just using in-game currency. This is no like microtransaction shenanigans or whatever. You're just like, helmet is way better than any other helmet that I've found so far, and I can pay this guy 200 gold for it, and then there you go. And now I have a cool looking helmet that's also got decent like stats and this and that and the other thing. And so I'm investing that time, but I still don't. It's just not quite the same thing. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, and there's nothing to kind of break that reality when you go back and look at it. Like I remember games like first games, on the Super Nintendo. I was like, oh my gosh, these look amazing.
Right? Yeah.
And then you go back and look and you're like, they were okay.
Right?
Yeah. Like there's times when I look at like NES games, I'm like, how did I even know what that was?
I played Adventure on the original Atari 2600, and I was just a dot moving around in a maze. And then I had a sword, which was just an arrow.
I kind of know what's going on. You projected some of that, but exactly. And try to get someone like a kid to go play an old game.
Oh, right.
That isn't just thinks it's cool to do like retro gaming.
Sure.
But going like, hey, try this out. To be like, what? No, that looks horrible. Like,
what is that, a duck? No, it's a dragon. That's a dragon, and he will bite you and carry you around because it's Adventure and the 2600. And he's like, carry who around? The dot. Oh, great.
This dot is carrying that dot.
Yeah, yes. Exactly, yeah. No, and so, yeah, you're right. I think that because of that, you get, you get into this different mind space, and when you don't have anything in front of you, particularly like graphically, admittedly, you're going to have figures in front of you in a miniature game, you're going to have cards in front of you with art on them and like a CCG and things like that. I don't know that CCGs make me think about stories. There's certainly plenty of CCGs out there that have stories behind them, obviously.
I kind of do. Like of the cards, you're like, you just kind of get a persona. Like, I remember like a Magic with the Lord of the Pit. And I just always was like, oh, I put, like playing the card, you just kind of like, oh, now suddenly this big beast is showing up.
It's on now. Yeah.
So
no, that's that. Yeah, I think it is different, but yeah. And then there's also, and we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's a tangible thing, which I think some people like that. I'm amazed by, as we've released our game Rain in Hell, I was amazed by how many people bought the print version.
Mm-hmm.
I did not think it was going to be as many people.
There's definitely seems to be, as our world moves more digital, there's definitely a push back to physical things. I mean, record stores were supposed to be gone, dead, and buried years and years ago, and now they're like surging back.
Oh yeah, no, and we're talking about actual vinyl, not just like albums or whatever you might buy it on CDs. But obviously, there's still an amazing amount of digital music sold every day. But there's also a surprising amount of vinyl and stuff like that.
Right, I think there's a connection back to that.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, is we were talking about this a little bit earlier too, is that like if you and grandma or you and aunt and uncle or whatever want to sit down and play Monopoly or Life or something like that, you can play a copy from 35, 50 years ago or whatever. It's still very playable.
Right.
But I don't currently. I know I have an Atari or an Xbox 360 in a house that just doesn't work. You know what I mean?
My PlayStation 3 doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my sister still has our Super Nintendo from being kids, but then you've got to try to. I think she has issues because trying to find a TV that'll work.
Right. Yeah. No. Trying to get those things hooked up now that all the TVs are HDMI for the most part.
Right.
There's I know there's adapters and stuff, but yeah, it's not as easy as it used to be to hook up. Like I remember back when we used to hook up the Atari 2600, and you used a butter
Channel
knife.
3 or 4.
You used a butter knife to screw it into the little wires in the back and all that stuff, and then you had to switch back and forth. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, you always had to keep a butter knife on top of the TV. Something the kids these days don't understand. But yeah, so, again, video games obviously in the realm of revenue won a long, long time ago. But there's nothing wrong with not making the most money. You know what I mean?
Right.
And because there's growth in the industry and you're seeing people who are coming up with new and interesting types of games all the time. And, there's obviously people out there who are super interested to watch it because, you got Critical Role there on Twitch making all the money. It's something that I don't think that we're seeing go away anytime soon.
No.
But it is a situation where you look at it and you go, I'm amazed that, because I've talked to people who are like, really? People still play tabletop games? And you're like, yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's amazing, yeah. But, and I think that it's like I said, I'm pretty sure it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And even me, who's really into tabletop stuff, I still do play video games here and there, but I'm not getting rid of my paints and my brushes and my tiny little people just because I've got a PlayStation 5, which I do. I have a PlayStation 5 now. I know. Wow. They sent me an email, like Sony. Yeah. Like, not because but just because I'm like, I've been a PlayStation, the PlayStation Online or whatever subscriber for a long time, and I know if I got on some sort of lottery or whatever, but they're like, hey, if you're interested tomorrow, you can get one from like 2 until 4 p.m. if you order on our website. And I was like, this sounds like a scam, and it turned out it wasn't. So, yeah, I just haven't plugged it in yet because I was getting ready, launching tabletop games so that people could buy them.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Again, another win for tabletop. Alrighty. Well, thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player or just aren't into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@imgamefor.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And check out our website at www.imgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.